Hello, today I'm going to be talking about, is Shatter Array better than Pressurizer or any raw damage mod, and how do you want to use Shatter Array or raw damage mods? So I'm going to go into the full analysis and breakdown of what I did for these tests, why I did them, and so this is just going to be a description of how I went about this test. So I did 4 tests, and each of these 4 tests was to test these mods individually. So Shatter Array versus raw damage, and then what I did after that was I created 2 more tests, and I tested um 2 separate loadouts, which was a 95% ignore armor build and a ignore armor at 50% and a raw damage mod, because obviously ignore armor will either go to 95% or go to 100%, and you kind of can't go more than that, so it made sense that 50% was kind of like a middle ground, and then I added raw damage after that. And so I'll be posting on the screen just in a bit of these loadouts so you guys can get a better visual of these loadouts and what I use exactly for these tests. And so I broke each test into I broke these tests into 3 repetitions of each. And why I only did 3 is because I kind of thought to myself that 3 would only be the most logical without having to overextend and make it too long and too in-depth, because I'm pretty sure you guys don't want to be seeing like 20, 45-minute videos of just numbers. That gets kind of boring real quick. And so that's kind of why I set it to 3, because that's really all you really needed, because, well, the main part of this test was to at least get the 70% chance to activate for these skills, to see what would be the max damage cap of these skills when they did proc. For each test, I'm going to talk about the numbers for each repeated act for the loadout, and I'll break them up into sections throughout the video so you can look back. I'm going to begin the first test right here, which will be with Frida. And why did I use Frida is because there's no extra damage bonuses she's technically getting, that we know. She's not getting like any range damage bonuses or anything like this, and the damage is going to be spread across each part equally. So even when we look at the total damage, it's going to be we're going to be looking at the total damage rather than individual parts, because that's what really actually matters here. And I wanted to use pellets because you would see a greater deviation with more pellets, to see if there's more variation, whether it be a crit or a non-crit, and you can really see how drastic the number changes when there is a crit or no crit. Here begins the first test, and I'm gonna kind of talk in the first test. So the first test, we used Frida, and we used a 95% defense ignore using Shatter Array and armor suppression at a total of 95% ignore armor. During this test, we had hit 3 numbers. The first number we hit was 1,397. The next number we had hit was 1,143. And the final hit was 1,217. The highest number we had hit during this was 1,397. The second test we did was using a loadout we used Pressurizer at 15%, raw damage at a 70% rate, and we used armor suppression backpack with a 50% ignore armor. And for this test, we got, for the first shot was 1,250, for the second shot we got 1,526, and for the next shot we got 1,527. The highest number for this one was 1,527. The reason why 2 and 3 hit so hard was, for some reason, we got really lucky. We got really unlucky on the first one when we're using Loadout 1, but for Loadout 2, we got really lucky for this one and hit an activation twice here, which we did see, I think, at 1527 and 1526. For the next 2 loadouts that are going to be shown on screen, I decided to test them individually, which is Shatter Array and Pressurizer. And so Loadout 3, which is going to be just Pressurizer alone with nothing, we shot 3 times, and the damage numbers were 1,156 for the first shot, 925 for the second shot, 1,386 for the third shot. And for the fourth loadout, we used Shatter Array just by itself, and we shot 3 times. The first shot was at 1,328, the second shot was 806, and the final shot was at 845. The highest damage numbers for Loadout 3 was at 1,386, and the highest damage number we got for Loadout 4 was at 1,328. What I'm going to talk about now is you're probably going to wonder, well, which one is better? And so I basically broke it down into percentages. The percentage difference between Loadout 1 and Loadout 2, which is Loadout 1, which is 95% ignore armor, and Loadout 2, which is 50% ignore armor with raw damage, there was a 13% deviation in percentages favoring Loadout 2. And for Loadout 3 versus Loadout 4, which Loadout 3 was just raw damage and Loadout 4 was armor ignore, we saw a percentage difference of 15% favoring raw damage instead. I did do another test, which will also be on screen. I don't have to go over the loadouts because you guys already seen the loadouts, but for this one, I did another test, but instead I increased the variation and frequency of this test. Instead of 3, we did 5 because we wanted to see, well, in a real scenario, right, like a boss or something, we want to know if which one actually succeeds, because we're kind of seeing from the last 3 tests we did, we had kind of a, well, it procced more, it procced less, maybe a few more crits, and so I kind of wanted to close the gap and make it a little bit closer to see to make up for those shortcomings. And so I increased the repetitions from instead of 3 to 5, and I didn't really grab loadouts 3 and 4 because we would see it in loadout 1 and 2. So I grabbed loadouts 1 and 2, and then I tested them for 5 repetitions for 1 set each. This is what you'll be seeing on screen right now, which is, so for loadout 1, out of 5 repeated actions, the first one was at 1,397. The second shot was at 1,254. The third shot we got was at 1,270. The fourth one was at 1,095, and the final shot was at 1,133. The total damage we netted overall, if we added them all up, was 6,149 within 5 shots. So that's for Loadout 1. Our highest damage number we got during this entire test was 1,397, which was our first shot. So for Loadout 2, which is what you'll also be seeing on screen, we had our first shot ranging at 1,387, our second shot at 1,097, our third shot at 1,218, our fourth shot at 1,250, and our final shot hit for a massive 1,569. And so our highest damage number shot was our last shot at 1,569. If we add all that up in 5 shots for the Loadout 2, we get 6,521. So I broke this into a percentage difference, and the percentage difference between the two was about a 5.87%, and this favored Loadout 2. If there's any takeaway here from this entire test, I can tell you that out of all the tests and comparison, we've seen that raw damage was 15% or 13%, sorry, 13% higher than Shatter Array naturally. And we also see from Loadout 1 and 2, we saw within 3 shots a 13% rate favoring Loadout 2. When we did a variation test, we saw that it still favored Loadout 2 at a 5% or 5.87%, which is technically 6%. So I mean, I don't really have anything else to show you guys. I guess I can share my thoughts on this. I think that overall, looking at the test, I can say that Shatter Array naturally is just not a good mod against raw damage. Raw damage is just overall better. Shatter Array doesn't really work too much, even at 45% versus 50% raw damage. I think maybe, no, I don't even think if you had like 10% damage without the 70%, it would still outbeat Shatter Array anyway. So Personally, I don't really find Shatter Array that good unless maybe the enemy just has an absolutely high number of armor. But I did test this against enemies that were really like way higher than my level. I think they're like 2 levels when I took this test below them, which means I'm kind of like fighting enemies with a lot of armor. And even then, like Shatter Array still cannot do better than raw damage, not even in Loadout 1 and 2, and in Loadout 3 and 4, it still favored raw damage regardless. So my advice is don't use Shatter Array. I think maybe Shatter Array does have its use for its specifics. It just wouldn't be good on a shotgun, and it also probably wouldn't be good on any machine gun. I think it might be far better on a rocket launcher. Maybe, I don't know. That would have to be tested. But again, I still think that for a rocket launcher, you can just put on a raw damage mod and still perform better. Now, of course, if you got 95% ignore armor and you compared it to just 15% damage, yes, ignore armor would 100% beat the 15% raw damage. But I mean, you're talking about including a backpack and then also putting it on the mech. So, like I said, you could do it like that, but you can also just put a raw damage mod on your gun, put on the armor suppression backpack, and you're going to be doing more damage than Loadout 1 and all the previous loadouts. Because for some reason that the extra 45% ignore armor you're getting from Shatter Array just isn't that good compared to raw damage. It's just, even when compared singularly to each other, raw damage is still good, and even when you kind of substitute them and cutting the stats in half and splitting them from 95% ignore armor to a ratio of ignore armor at 50% and 50% raw damage still comes out on top. And I think that'll kind of be it. So don't use Shatter Array. That would be my personal take. If someone tells you use Shatter Array, show them this video, because according to the test, and I ran multiple tests already, and they were all favoring raw damage at this point. So don't use Shatter Array at all. Just use raw damage. Maybe there will be a point in time in the game where ignore armor is way more needed than raw damage, but I can tell you right now, it is not needed. Just focus on inputting raw damage. And thank you guys for watching. Peace.